Hey guys, what's going on? Jake Bartolin here. I'm the mixing and mastering engineer for Reks' new track, Scarlet.
Take the long way back. Talk to me tomorrow.
So for those of you that aren't familiar with these type of videos, I really like to kind of open up the project file and really break down some of the sort of mixing and production choices that me and the artist made when we were putting together their song. Normally in these instances, I also like to go over the track and kind of look at the instruments and talk about what instruments I chose to go where. But in this case, the track was actually not produced by me. It was produced by an incredibly talented producer called Kev Coma. He's on Instagram. I'll have him linked in the description. Also, I don't know if he's going to be putting together a video like this, but if he is, I'll have a link in the description as well. My cat is meowing a whole bunch. She wants in. For this first verse, Tyler was basically saying, he's like, hey, I want something that's kind of singular, kind of focused more than, you know, just stacking a shit ton of vocals on top of each other. So we went with just a single vocal track here, very clean, kind of up the center. And if you actually look at the mix channel here, I really haven't done too much. Oh yeah, hasn't done too much. He's got 2 EQs, 3 compressors, and a whole bunch of other shit. So it looks like a lot, but for like a lead vocal channel, this really isn't too much. This first one, I'm really just using to cut out a bunch of like low end and give the track overall some more semblance. Second one is again, just more refining. I try to use the sort of style of, I can't remember the name of them right now, a less graphy looking EQ because that really helps me hone in on my ears, kind of listen to what I'm EQing. But in some circumstances, it's really easier to just, I know exactly I need to cut out this general area, and it's just easier to kind of see what I'm doing and pop in like this curve in the background here. You'll see if I play the track.
Lay me on the bed.
These sort of waves in the background here kind of help. It makes it easier just to kind of be able to quickly move on to the next thing. And especially when I'm mixing, I don't want my ears to get used to what I'm listening to. I want to play the little bit of the song, hear what needs to change, and then quickly move on to what else needs to change. Next thing I'm doing is just adding a little bit of subtle compression here.
Lay me on the bed.
It's really not anything going on. I really like this Red 3 compressor. This is actually a compressor you get when you buy any kind of like Focusrite Scarlet product. It's not the best compressor in the world. I would really like to get myself an LA2A, but this is kind of the one that I really use for general purpose stuff. Moving on to the next compressor, I've got this TDR Tokyo, it's Tokyo something recording. I can't remember what TDR stands for, but it's Tokyo digital recording or something like that. This compressor, totally free compressor. I've actually used this compressor for years. A lot of the tools that I use are free tools that I've just used and I'm really comfortable with them. Different engineers have different processes, but for this specific one, really I'm just kind of using this.
Lay me on the bed.
Again, just like a little tiny bit of compression because these vocals I really want to be clear. I don't want them to be pushed too hard.
Weather anymore.
The next plugin in the chain is going to be this multi-band compressor that I've got set up here. It's really just a de-esser. I've found that with a lot of more of these hardcore kind of explosive tracks that Reks has been doing lately, that it's nicer to compress the highs even more than I normally would on some of his more traditional lo-fi inspired stuff, just because it gives the vocals a little bit more focus and it helps them kind of punch through all of the noise that's happening in the rest of the track. And so if you kind of watch just like some of the meters here, you can kind of see that the high ends here, pretty much anything from 5K up is getting sort of pushed.
Lay me on the bed. Tell me I'm gonna be fine. The words crawled in and slow next to me all night. And I don't know if I'm getting better or I'm getting better at seeing whatever.
And it just kind of helps focus that a little bit more. And the other reason that I'm really using these 2 compressors and then a multiband, well, the multiband is pretty much just acting as a de-esser here. But the reason I'm using 2 compressors here, even though I'm doing very light compression, is because I'm trying to avoid putting in unwanted harmonics. It's a little bit of like a trick that you can do where if you use 2 different compressors, the type of distortion that you get or the color of that distortion is going to be slightly different between those 2 and helps kind of spread that out without getting too much of a compressy sound. Not compressy sound, what am I thinking of? Like that subtle distorted sound that only pops up when the compressor is actually really working hard. Even though these aren't working very hard, and I probably could have gotten away with just using one or the other. I tried to kind of stack them a little bit. One, because I was expecting to push this vocal a lot harder when I originally set up the channel. And then the other thing too, it just kind of helps minimize that distortion that's going to pop up eventually. After the de-esser in the chain, we've got this wonderful little plugin, Ozone Imager by Isotope. I'm using the Stereoize effect, which I haven't looked into, but I believe it's just doing some EQ tricks to make it sound like the actual audio is wider than it is. Because this track is a mono channel, without this, it gets very flat sounding and it's very down the center. And I wanted to give it just a little bit more width just to kind of give it a little bit of life and make it a little bit interesting to listen to. So you can actually hear this without it.
Lay me on the bed, tell me I'm gonna be fine.
If I turn it on,
Lay me on the bed, tell me I'm gonna be fine.
it's really subtle, and especially if you're not listening with headphones, you probably won't hear that. If you're listening on YouTube or Instagram, I don't even know if you'll hear it. It's one of those tiny little details that add up together to get some really crazy results. And then after I went through all that talk to talk about avoiding distortion and avoiding added artifacts from those compressors, we're actually adding in a little bit of dirt, a little bit of grit, using this Isotope Trash plugin. So this thing is actually sick. If you guys don't know about it, I think at one point it was free. I don't know if it's free anymore. It's like a distortion modeling kind of sort of plugin. There's a billion different settings in here and all sorts of different presets and all sorts of fun stuff that you can do. And this gives you a lot of control over sort of the color and mix and basically like the amount of distortion and trash and sort of grit the plugin actually puts on your signal. So again, if we listen to the vocals here and we kind of hear it with,
lay me on the bed, tell me I'm gonna be fine.
then we hear it without,
Lay me on the bed, tell me I'm gonna be fine.
it's really subtle. It just sort of helps the vocals get just that little bit more present full and a little bit thicker just to kind of be able to, again, have a presence in the song, especially a song that has as much distortion and stuff going on sonically as this one. So moving on to the chorus, this was kind of something that we pretty much every time try to make sound big, full, energetic, and all this other kind of sort of stuff that of course comes with a chorus. Go-to strategy for that has historically been to just take the vocals and stack them a whole bunch. And so if you kind of listen to just the vocals in this section,
Take the long way back.
what you're hearing here is you're actually hearing the original line, right, which is this.
Take the long way back.
And then on top of that, you're also hearing these harmonies.
Take the long way back.
They sound kind of funny whenever you have them soloed, but with everything else put in there,
Take the long way back.
and there's all these moving parts, and it just sounds really interesting to listen to. And then to juxtapose that, you've got this really tight, hyper compressed, super distorted vocal that just like gets right in your face.
Talk to me tomorrow, I just need my space.
And it's sort of there just because it's this almost back and forth feeling of you have these really big vocals, and then immediately after that you have that countered with this really tight, compressed, messed up kind of sound. It's supposed to catch your attention when compared to this huge, crazy vocal overstack that we just left. And so in the song, especially behind an instrumental, it's kind of this like dynamically changing soundscape that really tries to grab your attention from the thing. It's like one thing grabs your attention and then the next thing grabs your attention from the first thing, and then something else comes back and grabs it again. Kind of dynamic to listen to without having to change the volume and change like keys and do all this other crazy stuff.
Take the long way back. Talk to me tomorrow, I just need my space.
And then, of course, the second half of the chorus is pretty much just like a replacement of the first half. It's kind of like almost like a reversed mirror of what was going on, where initially the melody was in the high or the low part,
Way back.
but then now you have the melody in the high part.
It's the only place I feel okay.
The final thing you'll hear at the end of this chorus is a reverb swell right off the end of the vocals. And that's kind of just to give that vocals almost like a final push right at the end, where your brain kind of retroactively thinks back and says, wow, those must have been really loud because I'm hearing this reverb tail. The reverb tail isn't actually there, because if we were to put the reverb on that loudly for the entire chorus, it would kind of get a little bit messy and be a little bit hard to understand. It just kind of gives it a little bit more oomph right at the end of the track. So this next verse, it's kind of similar to the first one. We've just got this Really simple vocal that's barely tapping some compressors.
I keep wondering for ways to clear my head, shaking hands caress.
It just kind of fits really nicely in the mix between all the EQ and everything else. And then for the second half, we kind of go a little bit weirder, copy that kind of Ed Sheeran octave apart on the melody sort of thing, just to kind of help reinforce that melody line.
Anything feel alright? Am I fine or am I lying to myself?
And you can kind of hear that doubled up vocal part. Keen-eared among you might have heard this cool little like glitchy sort of effect that we put on the end of this yell here. There's this plugin called Xtrem. What we're doing is instead of it just being like an on-off kind of sort of like effect that's ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, this is automated to slowly turn up. And so that's how you get kind of this like really weird glitchy effect right at the end there. So for the bridge here, I've actually got his vocals going into the same couple compressors or compressors. What's wrong with me? Compressors that I had beforehand. This one again is just mostly here to kind of duck out the ridiculously high peaks. But then this next one is being a little bit more aggressive, and you'll see that in the gain reduction here. And so pushing it a little bit harder into the compressor really gives it a little bit more balls to kind of work with. It just overall makes everything sound a lot more aggressive. And these two channels we just slightly sort of tweaked onto either side just to kind of give them, you know, a little bit of width. This Send the World Away part, we have two channels that are hard panned left and right. Everything goes through the same compressor, so it's still the same loudness, but the stereo image changes, and so it gets ever so slightly wider, and that's what kind of gives you a little bit more of a powerful effect on the Send the World Away.
It's like I can't let go. Send the world away from me. It's crumbling.
It makes it just a little bit more intense to kind of listen to on that part. And then second half of the bridge here, we've got that effect, that pulsy sort of extra tremolo effect that comes back. Something that we did actually do is in the original beat, Coma has this kind of cool guitar part on one side. So Reks wrote a line that was above that, and what I thought would be kind of cool is if for the second time that comes in is if it panned to the other side. So I had to do a little bit of plumfuckery here, but basically what you hear is these vocals that kind of trade off with this guitar. So these vocals start on the left, the guitar starts on the right, and then halfway through they switch. And it's just kind of this cool call and response thing that sort of happens in that section. Then, of course, we come into the last two choruses, which are kind of more the same. Something worth pointing out, though, is normally in a chorus that lies that la 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 la. Pretty much more of the same for the most part, except something worth pointing out is normally for a chorus, the very ending here is just this high note.
It's the only place I feel okay.
For the last one, we actually added in a lower, it's not really a harmony because it's the same notes, but it's an octave down, but I guess it's a harmony technically, but it's also technically not. It's a whole thing. Anyways, we added that in at the last chorus just to kind of get that last chorus, that final real big push.
It's the only place I feel okay.
Scarlet by Reks, produced by Kev Coma, is out on all streaming platforms now, so give her a listen. If you guys like this video, let me know. I like doing these. Thanks for watching.